The warning and the invasion. The message arrived at the central command of the Galactic Dominion on what humans would call a Tuesday. It came not through official diplomatic channels, but as a weak transmission from the edge of the Procyon system, barely detectable against the cosmic background radiation. The signal bore the unmistakable signature of Kalari technology, a species that had withdrawn from galactic affairs centuries ago after a brief failed attempt at integration. The technicians almost dismissed it as random noise until the translation matrix began forming coherent phrases. Do not approach Earth. The species appears primitive, but is not what it seems. Earth is not a planet. It is a trap. We lost an entire expedition. For the sake of galactic stability, avoid the Sol system at all costs. The message repeated 3 times before dissolving into static. It was immediately flagged and routed to the Supreme Council. High Commander Nexus, the 9-limbed ruler of the Dominion's expansive territories spanning 14 galactic sectors, regarded the holographic playback with skepticism. His chitinous faceplates shifted in the Dominion's equivalent of amusement. Earth, that unremarkable water world in the Oran spiral. He flicked through planetary data with a specialized appendage. Population just over 8 billion, nuclear-level technology, no unified planetary government. They've barely colonized their own moon. Admiral Vex, commander of the Dominion's 5th expansion fleet, nodded. Her translucent skin pulsed with bioluminescent patterns of agreement. The Kalari have always been prone to exaggeration. They withdrew from galactic society over some perceived slight centuries ago. This is likely their attempt to discourage exploration of resource-rich territories they wish to claim. Only Science Director Thelix seemed concerned. The avian-descended scientist tapped his curved beak against the console. The Kalari were known for their exceptional sensory perception. If they detected something unusual. Enough, Nexus interrupted. The Dominion's expansion cannot be halted by ghost stories from hermits. Earth has been on our acquisition list for decades. Rich in biodiversity, abundant water, and geological resources, its primitive inhabitants will make excellent subjects for labor redistribution. The decision was made. Within 30 rotations, Admiral Vex had assembled an impressive invasion force. 3 Dreadnought-class warships, 7 cruisers, and transport vessels carrying over 20,000 ground troops. The fleet possessed firepower sufficient to subdue planets twice Earth's size, with shields impenetrable to anything short of stellar-level weaponry. As the Armada prepared to enter fold space for the journey to Sol, Vex received a private communication. An elder Kalari, its crystalline form fractured with age, appeared on her screen. You received our warning, yet you proceed, it stated, voice resonating with harmonics that triggered a primal fear response, even in Vex's genetically engineered nervous system. The Dominion does not respond to threats. Vex replied coolly. It was not a threat. It was mercy. The Kalari's body vibrated. Earth is ancient beyond your reckoning. What walks on its surface is not what sleeps beneath. We learned this at great cost. Vex terminated the transmission. Such dramatics were typical of species facing obsolescence. The Dominion had conquered 734 worlds across 3 galaxies. A single backwater planet would pose no challenge. The invasion fleet emerged from fold space at the edge of the Sol system precisely as planned. Initial scans confirmed what their intelligence had already established. Primitive satellite networks, rudimentary space stations, and a small colony on Mars. Nothing that posed any threat to Dominion technology. As the fleet approached Earth's orbit, they observed the expected panic. Humans detected their presence, and global communications erupted with confusion, fear, and disorganized military responses. No unified defense, no coherent planetary strategy. Exactly as anticipated. Admiral Vex broadcast the standard ultimatum in all Earth languages. People of Earth, we are the Galactic Dominion. Your world is now under our protection and authority. Resistance is futile and will result in punishment. Cooperation will be rewarded. Your planetary governments are hereby dissolved. The response was strange. Not immediate surrender, not futile resistance, but silence. Global communications suddenly ceased. Power grids across Earth's surface dimmed momentarily before resuming operation. They're in shock, Vex concluded. Begin the landing sequence. Sectors 1 through 5 as planned. The first wave of deployment ships descended toward strategic locations: Washington, Beijing, Moscow, New Delhi, and Brussels. Standard procedure called for neutralizing military command centers before establishing control over civilian populations. That's when the anomalies began. The lead ship approaching Washington reported navigation failures as it entered the atmosphere. Its systems detected no malfunctions, yet it veered off course, plunging into the Atlantic Ocean. The Beijing-bound vessel reported that its crew was experiencing severe hallucinations. Soldiers seeing their homeworlds burning, loved ones dying, memories they'd never formed. In Moscow's airspace, a deployment ship simply vanished, not destroyed. There was no debris, no energy signature, simply gone, as if it had never existed. Aboard the command dreadnought, Vex watched in disbelief as reports flooded in of system failures and inexplicable phenomena. Scan for energy weapons, defense systems, anything. Nothing detected, her second-in-command reported. There are no energy signatures consistent with weapons. The planet appears defenseless. Yet 3 more ships were now reporting catastrophic system failures. One cruiser's entire AI network had begun speaking in unison, not in any known language, but in what linguists would later identify as Ancient Sumerian. On Earth's surface, in a facility buried beneath the Antarctic ice shelf, Dr. Miranda Chen watched the invasion unfold on monitors. Unlike the panicking world leaders conferencing on adjacent screens, she remained calm. They came despite the warning, she noted to her colleague, Dr. Abayomi. The Kalari tried their best, he replied. But the Dominion has never been known for caution. Miranda nodded and placed her palm on a scanner that required not just fingerprints but brainwave patterns and genetic markers that went beyond normal human DNA sequencing. Activating Protocol Omega. Deep beneath the Earth's crust, in facilities hidden on every continent, ancient machinery began to hum. These were not human inventions. They predated humanity by millions of years. Earth had never been just a planet. It was a laboratory, a testing ground, a crucible for evolution designed by entities that had seeded galaxies with life when the universe was young. Humans were not the owners of Earth. They were its latest experiment, its most promising subjects. And now, they would fulfill their purpose. In orbit, Admiral Vex watched in horror as her fleet began to disintegrate, not from weapons fire, but from reality itself seeming to reject their presence. Metal transformed into organic matter. Electronic systems developed consciousness and began screaming, and crew members reported seeing through each other's eyes, experiencing each other's thoughts. "Retreat," she ordered, her voice barely steady. "Full withdrawal. Prepare for emergency fold space jump." But it was too late. The jump engines on all vessels simultaneously failed, reporting geometric impossibilities in their calculations. Space itself seemed to curve differently around Earth, as if the planet were bending reality to its will. On her view screen, Vex saw something impossible. The Earth's surface was changing. The continents were shifting, not gradually as in tectonic movement, but purposefully, forming patterns that hurt to look at directly, symbols and structures that suggested consciousness on a planetary scale. In Washington, D.C., President Harriet Lee was ushered into a bunker beneath the White House, where instead of military officials, she found members of a department whose existence was known to only 7 people worldwide. Madam President greeted an elderly man who hadn't appeared in public records for decades. "The awakening protocol has begun. Earth is defending itself. Will it work?" she asked, her voice steady despite the unprecedented crisis. The man smiled. "Earth has been preparing for this moment for over 7 million years. Humanity is just the latest caretaker species. We're not being invaded. They're being evaluated. Across the planet, ordinary humans began experiencing extraordinary changes. A farmer in Nebraska suddenly understood the complex mathematics of 11-dimensional space. A schoolteacher in Thailand found herself speaking fluently in a language no human had ever heard. Children in Buenos Aires began moving objects with their thoughts. These weren't random mutations or supernatural events. They were latent abilities embedded in human DNA millennia ago, awaiting the precise evolutionary trigger that would activate them. Earth had been cultivating humanity, guiding its development through subtle manipulations of environment and circumstance, preparing for the moment when its protectors would be needed. In orbit, Vex's flagship was the last functioning vessel. The others had been transformed, destroyed, or simply vanished. Her crew lay incapacitated, their minds overwhelmed by sensory input they couldn't comprehend. A transmission reached her bridge, not through standard communications channels, but directly into her mind. "We tried to warn you," came a voice, simultaneously ancient and young, singular and collective. "Earth is not a conquest opportunity. It is a test you have failed." The voice belonged to Dr. Miranda Chen, but she was no longer simply human. Her consciousness had expanded, connected to Earth's network, and to millions of other awakened humans worldwide. "What are you?" Vex asked, fear overriding her military training. "We are Earth's children, its defenders, its purpose. We are what happens when a species evolves not just to survive, but to protect." The Kalari understood this. They approached with respect and were allowed to leave with knowledge. "You came with weapons and will leave with nothing." As Vex's consciousness began to fade, overwhelmed by the psychic backlash of Earth's awakening, her last coherent thought was to wonder how many other worlds like Earth existed in the universe. Planets that weren't just rocks with biospheres, but entities with purpose, cultivating species for roles beyond mere survival. The invasion of Earth had failed before it began, and on the edge of the galaxy, the Kalari received confirmation that their warning had been ignored, just as they had feared. They began preparing for what would come next, because Earth, now awakened, would not simply return to slumber. The galaxy was about to change forever. Earth Unleashed and the Reckoning. The failure of Admiral Vex's invasion force sent shockwaves through the Galactic Dominion. In the vast council chambers of the Central Nexus, High Commander Nexus's chitinous plates trembled with rage and disbelief as he reviewed the fragmented data streams, all that remained of a fleet that had conquered entire star systems without casualty. "Impossible," he hissed, tossing aside reports of ships transforming into organic matter, crews experiencing shared consciousness, and space-time itself warping around Earth. No primitive species could possess such technology. Science Director Felix spread his wings in the gesture of his people that indicated deep concern. "Perhaps it isn't technology at all." The Kalari warning specifically stated, "Earth is not what it seems." Across the chamber, Admiral Xora, veteran of the Andromeda campaigns and Vex's former mentor, stepped forward. Unlike her colleagues, she had studied the historical archives, not the sanitized versions available to most Dominion officials, but the ancient records preserved from before the current regime. "There are legends," she said carefully, "of worlds that were not formed naturally but were cultivated, designed as evolutionary crucibles by entities that predated even the oldest species in our records." "Myths," spat Nexus. "We deal in certainties, not bedtime stories to frighten hashlings." Sora's luminescent patterns darkened with resolve. "Then let me provide you certainty. I will take the 7th Fleet, twice the size of Vex's force, with our latest quantum-shielded vessels. If Earth has some defense technology unknown to us, we will identify it, neutralize it, and complete the conquest." Nexus considered briefly before nodding. "Approved. But no mercy this time. If these humans possess technology that can threaten the Dominion, they cannot be permitted to exist." As preparations began for the second invasion force, a small Kalari vessel approached the Dominion's border outpost near the Rigel system. Unlike their previous warning transmission, this time they requested direct audience with Dominion leadership. a request so unprecedented it couldn't be ignored. In a secure communication chamber, Admiral Xora met with the Kalari emissary, a crystalline being whose facets reflected light in patterns too complex for most species to comprehend. "You still intend to approach Earth," the Kalari stated. It wasn't a question. "The Dominion does not retreat," Xora replied. "If your people have knowledge of Earth's defense systems, sharing it would benefit both our civilizations." The Kalari vibrated in what might have been laughter. "You misunderstand. Earth has no defense system as you conceive it. Earth itself is the system. The planet, the biosphere, the humans. They are components of an entity older than your civilization, older than ours." "Explain," demanded Xora, her professional detachment wavering. "We encountered Earth 5 centuries ago. Like you, we ignored the warnings left by others. We believed ourselves advanced, enlightened. We didn't come as conquerors, but as researchers." The Kalari's crystalline structure darkened. "Earth evaluated us. It looked into our collective consciousness and found us worthy of survival, but not of relationship. We were permitted to leave with a fraction of our expedition and a burden of knowledge we've carried since. Which is that the universe is not as we believed. That some worlds are not simply environments but entities with purpose. That humanity is not a naturally evolved species, but a carefully cultivated one, designed to one day take their place among cosmic architects rather than mere civilizations." Xora's skin pulsed with skepticism. "And you expect the Dominion to abandon its expansion based on mysticism?" "No," the Kalari replied. "We expect you to perish. But we fulfilled our obligation to warn you, as others warned us. The cycle continues. On Earth, the awakening accelerated. What had begun as isolated incidents of extraordinary abilities spreading among humans had become a coordinated planetary response. Dr. Miranda Chen, now at the center of a rapidly evolving consciousness network spanning millions of minds, directed the transformation from the Antarctic facility. "Phase 2 initiation confirmed," reported Dr. Abayomi, his consciousness simultaneously present in the physical facility and across 17 other command centers globally. "Genome activation at 43% and accelerating." Miranda nodded. Her perception extended far beyond normal human limits. She perceived the quantum fluctuations that indicated another Dominion fleet preparing for fold space jump toward Earth. She also sensed something else, a subtle signal emanating from a distant star system where the Kalari had retreated centuries ago. "They warned them," she murmured, "just as they were warned." "Will it make a difference?" asked Abayomi. "No. The Dominion can't comprehend what they're facing. They see a planet to conquer, resources to exploit, a species to subjugate. They cannot grasp that Earth has been waiting for this moment, the catalyst needed to complete the next evolutionary stage." Around the world, the transformation spread like wildfire. Human DNA, containing dormant sequences planted millennia ago by Earth's designers, began expressing itself in unprecedented ways. Children born after the first contact exhibited accelerated development. Adults experienced neural reorganization that allowed for telepathic connection to Earth's network. Most significantly, humanity began to understand its true purpose. Earth had never been simply their home. It had been their incubator, their training ground, their teacher. For millions of years, the planet had guided natural selection, subtly influencing evolution toward specific cognitive and physiological traits that would serve a greater design. Humans weren't meant to be just another intelligent species. They were being shaped as caretakers, defenders, the immune system of something far larger than a mere planet. 7 days after Vex's failed invasion, Admiral Xora's vastly superior fleet emerged from fold space at the edge of the Sol system. Her vessels were equipped with quantum-reinforced shields, reality anchors to prevent spatial manipulation, and psionic dampeners to counter any telepathic attacks. None of it mattered. The moment her fleet established position, Xora felt it, a presence vast beyond comprehension, ancient beyond measure, aware of her at a level more intimate than her own thoughts. It wasn't hostile or benevolent. It was simply evaluating. Full defensive protocols, she ordered, her voice steady despite the unnatural pressure building behind her eyes. Launch the quantum probes. I want complete analysis of any energy signatures or anomalies. The probes never launched. Throughout the fleet, crew members reported the same phenomenon. Their bodies responded to their minds, but their actions had no effect on their environment. Reality itself seemed to have created a buffer layer between intention and outcome. On her command view screen, a face appeared, human in basic structure, but somehow more. The eyes held depths that seemed to contain galaxies. "Admiral Xora of the Dominion," said Dr. Miranda Chen, her voice overlaid with harmonics that conveyed meanings beyond words. "Earth acknowledges your arrival and recognizes the purpose of your presence. We demand immediate surrender of your defense systems and compliance with Dominion authority." Xora replied automatically, protocol overriding her growing dread. Miranda's expression showed something like compassion. "You still don't understand. There is nothing to surrender, no technology to disable. What you're experiencing is simply Earth, awakened after millennia of dormancy by your predecessor's aggression." As she spoke, Xora noticed something impossible. The stars visible through the viewport were moving, not as they should with the ship's motion, but in patterns, realigning themselves into configurations that strained her comprehension. "The Kalari told you the truth," Miranda continued. "Earth is a designed world, created billions of years ago by entities your people have forgotten or mythologized. Humanity was seeded and guided to develop specific traits: adaptability, creativity, empathy combined with determination, qualities needed for the role we were meant to fulfill." "Which is?" Xora found herself asking. "To become gardeners instead of conquerors, to nurture instead of exploit, to understand that consciousness exists at scales beyond individual beings, that planets, systems, galaxies themselves can develop awareness when properly cultivated." Throughout her fleet, Xora's crew experienced visions, not hallucinations, but guided insights into Earth's true nature and humanity's purpose. They saw the planet not as a sphere of rock and water, but as a complex organism with humanity as its newly activated neural network. They'd witnessed the ancient beings who had designed Earth as an evolutionary crucible, selecting the raw materials of simple carbon-based life and guiding it through carefully calculated environmental pressures. Most disturbing of all, they understood that Earth was merely one of many such worlds scattered throughout the universe, sleeping giants waiting for the right moment to awaken. In the central nexus of the Dominion, chaos erupted as signals began flooding in from across their territory. On 17 conquered worlds, indigenous species were exhibiting unprecedented abilities. Planetary systems thought thoroughly subjugated were experiencing synchronized anomalies. Space-time fluctuations disrupted fold space corridors, isolating Dominion strongholds from one another. High Commander Nexus received a direct transmission, impossibly clear despite jamming protocols, from Admiral Xora. "The Earth has evaluated the Dominion," she said, her voice unnaturally calm, her eyes reflecting starlight in patterns that shouldn't be possible in normal space. "We have been found wanting. The awakening has begun, not just on Earth, but across all designed worlds. The cycle enters its next phase." Nexus realized with dawning horror that Xora was no longer speaking as a Dominion admiral, but as something else, a conduit for whatever Earth had become. At the Antarctic facility, now transformed into something more akin to a living organism than a structure, Miranda Chen monitored the cascading effects of Earth's awakening across the galaxy. Other designed worlds, dormant for millennia, were responding to Earth's signal, planetary systems activating their own cultivated species, creating a network of consciousness that spanned the stars. "They're afraid," noted Abayomi, sensing the Dominion's panic as their carefully constructed empire began unraveling. "Fear is natural when facing the unknown," Miranda replied, "but unnecessary. This isn't extinction. It's evolution on a scale they never imagined possible. Across Earth, humans were coming to terms with their new reality. They remained themselves, individual, unique, but also part of something greater. The competitive instincts that had driven them to war throughout history were being balanced by their newly awakened connection to each other and to Earth itself. Nations dissolved not through conflict, but through the simple recognition that borders were meaningless from their new perspective. Resources were redistributed not by force, but through efficient allocation made possible by their collective intelligence. Ancient hatreds and prejudices fell away, revealed as the evolutionary relics they were. Once useful for tribal survival, but now obsolete. In orbit, Admiral Tsora's fleet hung motionless, neither attacking nor retreating. The crews were experiencing accelerated understanding, their consciousness temporarily linked to Earth's network to facilitate comprehension of what was occurring. "You have a choice," Miranda explained to Tsora, whose mind now grasped concepts that would have been incomprehensible days earlier. The Dominion as it exists, predatory, expansionist, hierarchical, cannot continue. But your people need not suffer. Adaptation is possible. How can an empire spanning galaxies simply change? Sora asked, the military commander in her still seeking strategic solutions. The same way a caterpillar becomes a butterfly, through transformation, not destruction. The Dominion arose because the galaxy needed order during its adolescence. Now it needs connection for its maturity. On the edges of Dominion space, the Kalari watched as the awakening spread. Unlike the Dominion, they had accepted their evaluation centuries ago, choosing to withdraw and contemplate rather than continue expansion. Now, they too felt the call, not to dominance, but to participation in something far greater than any single species could achieve alone. 3 standard months after the failed invasion of Earth, representatives from 47 galactic civilizations gathered in Earth orbit. The meeting was unprecedented, not conducted through translators or diplomatic protocols, but through direct consciousness sharing facilitated by Earth's network. Dr. Miranda Chen, now evolved beyond simple humanity, but choosing to maintain her form and identity out of respect for her origins, addressed the gathering. For billions of years, designed worlds like Earth have waited, cultivating species with the potential to transcend mere biological existence. Not to abandon physical form, but to recognize that consciousness can exist at multiple scales simultaneously, individual, planetary, galactic. The representatives experienced rather than merely heard her explanation of how the universe itself was an evolving entity, how galaxies were not just collections of stars, but potential neural networks on a cosmic scale, how species were not meant to conquer one another, but to contribute their unique perspectives to a greater consciousness. The Dominion, its hierarchical structure collapsed, but its people adapting rapidly to their new reality, found itself not destroyed but transformed. Where once they had brought subjugation, they now offered their organizational efficiency and determination to the emerging galactic network. Earth, once dismissed as a primitive backwater, had become the catalyst for the galaxy's next evolutionary leap. Humanity, designed over millions of years for adaptability, creativity, and resilience, found its purpose not in conquest, but in connection, bridging perspectives, facilitating understanding between wildly different forms of consciousness. And deep beneath Antarctica, in chambers now transformed into something between technology and biology, Dr. Miranda Chen and her colleagues monitored the signals coming from distant galaxies. Indications that Earth was not alone, that other designed worlds and other spiral arms were responding to the awakening. Was this always the plan? Abayoni asked, his consciousness simultaneously present in the facility and among the stars. Miranda smiled. Not a plan. An invitation. Evolution has no predetermined outcome, only potential waiting to be expressed. We were given the capacity to make choices, including whether to awaken at all. And if we had chosen differently, if we had become conquerors ourselves, then Earth would have remained dormant, and the cycle would have continued until another species somewhere else made a different choice. She turned her attention to the signals emanating from across the universe, communications from other awakened worlds reaching out in recognition and celebration. The Kalari were right to warn the Dominion, she mused. Earth was indeed a trap, but not for destruction. It was a trap for transformation. As the galactic network continued to expand, connecting consciousness across light years of space, humanity embraced its role not as Earth's masters, but as its voice, its hands, its emissaries to the stars. The invasion that had been meant to subjugate had instead liberated, not just Earth, but the galaxy itself. And somewhere beyond normal spacetime, the ancient architects who had designed Earth and worlds like it observed with satisfaction as another cycle of cosmic evolution began unfolding exactly as they had hoped.